Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new and shining episode of Back to Basics. It has been just forever since we've seen you. Actually, it's been about 5 minutes because we record a lot of these back to back. But you know what? Such is life. For those of you who are just joining us today, again, I continually ask why. Like, start at the beginning. You'll have a much better idea of what we're doing. But I am the inimitable because nobody would want to, Pastor Don, and I am joined by the inimitable because everybody tries and fails, Courtney.
Thank you. No one has ever tried to be me, I assure you. It would be a bad life choice.
Have you not met my daughter? When she first met you, she was like, that's the girl with the rainbow hair and the sonic screwdriver, and wanted to be like you for forever.
I miss the rainbow hair. I miss the sonic screwdriver. The only one I had left, my kid has made off with now, and I am sonicless. It's a tragedy.
I actually don't know what happened to that one either. Like
I know you said it was like a good luck charm forever.
New Jersey and Japan.
Hmm.
So today we are going to be tearing into Genesis chapter 17. Last week, which again was 3 minutes ago for us, last week we had the arrival of onto the scene of Ishmael, following forward from our latest episode of violent sexual assault, and the establishment of the covenant with Hagar via Ishmael, who is going to be a wild ass of a man, and what that means we will discover in due course. Today we are going to be ripping into Genesis chapter 17, which gives us the covenant with Abram and God. Now, you may be thinking, didn't we just talk about this in chapter 15, like in a big old two-parter 2 or 3 episodes ago? And you would be correct, because the Bible is nothing if not hilariously redundant. So some of this is stuff we've already discussed because they're just kind of reiterating it. Some of it is new pieces. There is not a kind of scholarly or theological consensus as to whether these are separate covenants or the same covenant, just kind of spaced out a little bit. To me, reading it, it kind of feels like the author started talking about the covenant, then realized, oh crap, I forgot to mention the whole Ishmael story, told that, and then went back to telling the covenant again. Because remembering, of course, these are oral histories. So if I that's kind of how I take it, but there are a lot of different ways you could take it. Some people say that there were 2 covenants, some people, a lot of different ways to take it. Suffice it to say, at least one covenant exists, and this is either part of it or a separate covenant that is almost exactly the same and supersedes the first. So, that all said, dearest Courtney, would you like to take hold of the situation and read all 27 magnificent verses of this?
Yeah, sure. Alrighty. The sign of the covenant. Chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will make you exceedingly numerous. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your offspring after you. And I will give to you and your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan, for perpetual holding, and I will be their God. God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Throughout your generations, every male among you shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old, including the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money must be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight. God said, no, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. And when he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all the slaves born in his house or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And his son Ishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised, and all the men of his house, slaves born in the house, and those bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Whole lot of talk about penises.
Yeah, big fan of this passage. And look, there's a lot to unpack here, but like the one thing that always strikes me is the day after, the day Abram finished his conversation with God must have been a hell of a day to be a man in the house of Abraham.
Guess what, guys? New plan.
Guess what, guys? New plan. We're cutting parts of our dicks off.
Why?
What?
God told us to.
Yeah. Now, like,
why that?
Well, that's actually like a question that is worth exploring. Is like, why?
I feel like this is incredibly touchy.
It is. It is for a lot of people, and like, you know, it's interesting because of how this one keeps coming back. Like so many Christians out there, by the way, believe that circumcision is a Christian practice. Like, without getting a little TMI on you, like I ain't exactly hanging foreskin.
I mean, it's also like an American thing too.
Yeah,
from
very much an American
like,
Christian thing.
Throughout a lot of the rest of the world, like it's just like, why are you circumcised? You're not Jewish.
Yeah. And that dates back to Kellogg and some of the other Kellogg and Graham and the weirdly anti-masturbatory like public folks in the kind of like the early 1900s. And if you've never heard anything about those guys, let me tell you, read up on them because they're a friggin' trip. But these were extremists in the religious circle who felt that any form of sexuality at all was unacceptable. And they firmly believed that if you circumcise a dude, he will not be tempted to any of the pleasures of the flesh. And so they brought it back. Fun fact, graham crackers and both graham crackers and Special K were invented because they figured they would be so boring that they would stop people from, you know, taking care of the downstairs dirty deeds. So yeah, American history is freaking weird in a lot of ways, but
I like graham crackers.
I like them too. Like, you know, they're hot.
That's supposed to be so dull that, no, anyway, every time I hear that story, I'm like, but graham crackers are tasty.
Yeah, right. Like you kind of screwed that out. Also, like early graham crackers didn't have any sugar in them and were terrible. So
that would be like cardboard. Yeah, mission accomplished.
Yeah, that was actually the goal. So like a lot of what we modernly as Americans think of circumcision is more tied to like Kellogg and Graham and their kind of religious extremism and stuff like that. And it was an adopted process because it was, well, like if we're going to cut on dicks, this is the one way we know how to do it. So they adopted it rather than invent their own form of genital mutilation to stop people from enjoying sex. So it's not specifically religious. So as
also, I'm going to throw this out there, given the number of kids that like you have, and then, you know, throwing mine onto the pile. I don't think it works to remove sexual urges or pleasure.
Yeah, if you want to know if that works, I can give you a list of ex-girlfriends and current wife who could probably tell you a very different story. No, in the end, I think it's worth noting and revisiting, because again, we're not a Jewish podcast, we're a Christian podcast, that even when you take circumcision into account as a sign of the Abrahamic covenant, Christians threw this shit out the window a long time ago. Like, this is not our thing. 150,000%. Like, there are.
Yeah, Jesus said, "Here I have made with you a new covenant."
Yeah.
I might be butchering that passage, but
No, you're pretty well solid on that. And there are multiple chunks of the epistles that are saying, no, you don't need to bother with circumcising anymore. We don't really need to worry about that. There was I think it was from an old Mel Brooks movie where they were joking about circumcision and said, yeah, you don't want to get sand up in there. And I'm like, actually, you know what? Historically speaking, that's kind of probably where the practice originated. Like, you've got desert nomads being exposed to all sorts of various diseases and fungi and sand upon sand upon sand. Like, walking around with something holding all of that up against your bit probably wasn't the smartest thing for it. Like,
I know there's literally nothing we can say about this topic that's not going to just like red-faced infuriate some portion of the population. But I would just like to say at this point, for my part too, I'm really happy I had a girl, so I didn't have to discuss this entire issue. But also, like, for my part, we're not here to like pass judgment on this. This is something that is like super personal, super cultural. I have opinions on it. I also don't have a male child, so that's none of it's like, yeah, where it's not.
I got 2 of them.
Yeah, what I'm getting at here is I have seen the understandable opinion that circumcision is genital mutilation. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm trying to be very careful about this. I have seen that thrown around as yet another way to like flex your shitty anti-Semitism muscles. Like, we don't want that here. Like, no.
Yeah, no, we're not here to shit on the practice.
None of that shit. None of it.
And let me be clear, as I was going to get into before you jumped in there too.
Sorry.
There are a host of situations in which circumcision is not only a good call, it's medically necessary. I knew a guy who had to get circumcised as an adult because there was just no way to keep that sucker from getting infected. Like, it's a thing that happens. It's sometimes medically necessary. There are still in the medical community debates to this day over whether it has medical benefits as a universal.
Which is one of the big reasons that I'm like, I am not having a public stance on this. I refuse.
Yeah. My public stance on anything body alteration is like, unless you have a particular reason for doing it, don't. Like, if it ain't hurting anybody, leave it alone. That's my particular perspective. But if you have a reason for doing it, like, go for it. And yes, being part of the Abrahamic covenant, as you understand it, is a reason that if you feel that that's for doing that, sure. Keeping in mind that any sort of body alteration could be technically argued as mutilation. It's like, your tattoos are mutilation. You're stabbing yourself millions of times to change how your flesh looks.
The Bible's got something to say about tattoos too.
Yeah, it's got stuff to say about that. But piercings are technically a mutilation. I mean, they're all like anything that changes the shape or appearance of your body to a different. Are
piercings declared tattoo anywhere in the Bible, or?
Not that I'm aware. I mean, I'm sure there's some interpretation.
Yes, some of mine actually are real. It's not all just fake nose and lip rings. The ears are real.
Yeah, I myself do not have any tattoos or intentional piercings. I say intentional because I have accidentally drilled a hole in myself for once in a while. Because
this is not shocking.
Artificial. That's a thing. So no, we're not taking a religious or moral stance on circumcision. It is, I will stress, as a pastor hosting a Christian video series podcast, it's a Jewish practice. It's not a Christian practice. If you are
there's a firm stance we can take. If anybody says that you have to be circumcised to be Christian, they're full of shit.
Yeah. And if you are a Christian, if you are a Christian and you're hanging some foreskin, you got nothing to feel guilty about. And if you got a Christian and you're not hanging foreskin, you might want to ask your parents some questions. Like, that could be a good discussion to have. I've certainly had it with mine. But it doesn't make you any less of a Christian.
No, it's just your dick.
Yeah, exactly. We're Christians, and particularly those of us on the progressive side of things, we're fairly sex positive Christians. We love all dicks in all shapes and sizes. and we love the other parts too, for what it's worth. But that's not what we're talking about in the Bible today. Anyway,
All junk is goofy, equally goofy.
all junk is goofy. All
Your,
junk is fun.
your local bisexual decrees it. All junk is
Every
fun.
junk is sacred.
All
We're
junk
throwing
is
it back to Monty
hilarious.
Python. All right. So anything else we want to dig into this now that we've had our nice rant about circumcision?
It's all uncooked sausage and roast beef sandwiches everywhere.
Love it. Love it.
Anyway, okay, I'm sorry, I'm terrible. Oh no, these verses were always going to get like that.
Yeah, and
if
you
you're
know, I
looking
was going
for
to make a joke about going to Arby's, but we'll move on.
if you're if you're looking for like a classy, reverent podcast,
You're not
about
in the
the
right
Bible,
place.
you need to do another search because this is not. That's fine. That's not what this is. This has never been what this is.
We're not keeping it classy.
All right. Yeah, it was a lot of this was just about circumcision, man.
Yeah,
It's half of it.
I remember the
I was
first
like,
time.
wow, I've never said the word circumcised this many times in my life.
I remember the first time I read this as a kid, and I was just like, this reads like God's like giving a voicemail or an answering machine. Must have much younger when I was a kid a long time ago. You know, it's like God leaving a leftover voicemail saying, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to talk to you about penises."
You still want all the Canaan and that stuff, though, right? You still want the generations.
I'm still giving you the Canaan, but I forgot to mention the whole cutting off part of your dick thing. So let's make sure we don't forget about that. And I'm going to tell you all about that. And also, just in case you were wondering, once you've cut off parts of your dick, go ahead and change your name while you're at it.
Change your name to something suspiciously similar but different.
Yeah. Now.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about that. Why? What? Who?
The alterations.
Do we know?
The alterations to the name are minor by English standards, but they have a certain meaning in Hebrew. And I'll admit, I am not well read on the functional alterations to their names and what they mean in terms of context. I know that the switch from Sarai to Sarah is very minor. Like, it's not meant. I do know that these are not meant to be name changes that indicate a different identity. This is more like a Pokemon evolution. Like, this was pre-covenant you, this is post-covenant you, you know, Abraham and then Sarai Jew, basically.
So you're saying if you use a circumcision stone on Abram, it evolves into Abraham.
Pretty much. Exactly.
This is a stupid podcast. You shouldn't be listening.
It's terrible. It's terrible. You shouldn't be listening to this. You could be doing anything better with your time. But I'm glad you're here nonetheless.
Yeah. I swear we have meaningful conversations on here sometimes. I'm just tired.
Some of them are good. And again, like, a lot of this is just revisiting the legalistic act of chapter 15 that we've already discussed. There's not a whole lot new we can add to this other than the fact that this is, as the NRSVUE header indicates, this is making a more concrete sign of it. So 15 was more about the actual promise itself and what God offered. This is now more about how are we marking this? How are we making it clear? How are we making it obvious? Now, if we talk about Genesis as a later composition, then this can be seen as a retroactive explanation put in place as to, hey, why are you guys all missing pieces of your dicks? Like, because I mean, later Israel, like, everybody's circumcised, and people are going to start asking questions about that.
No, I mean, this is more of an anthropological question, but do we see circumcision widespread in like this geographical region outside of Judaism? Or,
well, I gotta admit, I am not a scholarly expert.
You don't know. You've had to say I don't know in your own complicated set of words more freaking times this time.
I don't know everything about everything, you know, and like, as a cis-het white male, I am not an expert in Middle Eastern penile status. You know, it's not something that's really topped my interest list over the years. So I can see logically why it might be, particularly for nomadic tribes from the Middle East, particularly desert cultures. I can
We
see a
can
lot.
logic it out, but we don't have any actual facts, so there's not much point in logicking it out because it's all supposition.
I'm not saying there aren't facts out there. Like, I'm pretty sure like a Google search and reading through any of the like 5,000 books back there could probably get me some kind of answer. But I'm not going to do that on a podcast video series, because you'll just be sitting here watching me read books for the next few hours, and that wouldn't be exciting for anybody, least of all me, who's got places to go. So I'm just going to say I don't know and leave it at that. But yeah, probably like, it would make sense.
All right, we got anything else to talk about on this one?
Honestly, not really. We got a rehash of the covenant. We talked about the name changes.
Yeah, because it's a lot of the same stuff, like you said, from 15.
Yeah, he does, and I think if you do take this as a revisit of the covenant, rather than just like them forgetting about Ishmael and then stopping and then retelling the same covenant, if you take this as God coming back again later to say, okay, now I'm going to tell you more about the covenant, then it makes sense the introduction of Isaac as an idea in verse 19. Like to say, oh yeah, this Ishmael thing. No, that wasn't it. No, that wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. Your wife Sarah is going to have a son. So
that makes sense. So it's kind of God scooting in and being like, "Hey, I appreciate the initiative. This isn't the direction we're going in."
Right. Also, you may have missed this if you were focusing on covenantal relationships, but this is also the moment at which biblical canon confirms that old people totally get it. Like they're in their 90s, they're still getting it daily. That's okay, totally allowed. Bible, absolutely a sex positive place. I didn't see what finger you were adjusting your glasses there with.
I'm not capable of rational thought anymore. I think I got a call.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything we need to here, to be honest. It's pretty much dicks all the way down from here anyway. So next week we are going to
dicks all the way down.
Yep. The great Atween has got something going on. Anyway, we are going to talk more about Isaac next chapter. We got chapter 18, which we got the first bit is about Isaac and the promise of Isaac and how that plays out. And then for the episode after that, which is going to be really fun, we're starting to get to that famous S word, Sodom. Speaking of dicks, we're going to be getting into that discussion, which is going to be a very different one, and maybe even different than you expect. If you're expecting condemnation, and if so, what podcast have you been listening to? Anyway, for this week though, the usual stuff, links are down below. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We've got an ongoing Bible study that we're doing in partnership with First Reformed Church. That is Wednesday nights on the East Coast of the US, Thursday mornings if you're here in Japan. Everybody's welcome to join that. We've got other hit video series and podcasts with literally tens of listeners. You can catch those, all of the links below. And as per usual, our one request, hope, and prayer for you is to...
Oh, it's not our... Like, share, comment, and subscribe.
That's the one. I'm taking advantage of the fact that we're on the opposite sides of the planet, so she can't actually murder me. Not that she doesn't want to.
I don't know. How far do you think I can throw a mini pumpkin?
One of these days you're going to try. One of these days you're going to try.
What? Oh, sorry.
Anyway.
I've lost all wit and cleverness at this point. We just
and I think it's time to call it. So no matter where you are or what you're doing,
and you've frozen up.
I'm doing okay here. I lost you though. But whatever's going on, I just want to encourage you to have a great week, and we will see you on the next episode of Back to Basics, where I can guarantee you that at least one of us will not be frozen. And the welcome back. I'm just saying
your internet connection is unstable. Well, fucking thank you, computer.
I think we figured that out. I'm just saying goodbye to all the folks at home. So if you want to give a nice little goodbye, we can say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a nice week. We'll see you later. Bye.